Hi everybody, today I'm going to talk about corsets and asymmetry, how to detect it or what the symptoms might be, the causes of asymmetry, and what you might be able to do about it. So firstly, how do you detect asymmetry in your corset? Let's say you're wearing your corset and it might feel comfortable to you, but then you catch yourself in the mirror and you notice that one side of your waist might look a little bit more cinched in or more dramatically curved than the other side of your body. Or you might notice that the corset is twisting or warping on you, especially if you have a slanted bust. Or you might notice that the bust is centered, but in the back, the laces might be offset. It might not be centering around your spine, but it might be pushed off to one side slightly and it's not in the center. Or your corset might look completely symmetric, but you might consistently notice that you have some discomfort or soreness or hot spots on one side of your body and none on the other. So all of these would be signs that your corset is not fitting your body properly. It's not putting the same amount of pressure on one side of your body compared to the other, and that would be a sign of asymmetry. So what could some of the causes be for this asymmetry? Well, the corset itself could be the cause of the asymmetry. The corset itself might not have been constructed symmetrically. And this is why as soon as I get a corset in the mail, even before I try it on the first time, I always measure it to make sure that, first of all, the measurements match up my specifications if it's a custom corset, but mostly that it is symmetric on both sides if I commissioned it to be symmetric. So I actually have a tutorial on how to measure your corsets with precision, and I will link it up here somewhere. At the very minimum, I measure both sides of the corset at the waistline where you can see the waist tape and make sure that it is the same on both sides. I will also measure the top edge, which is usually the underbust area or the rib cage if it's an underbust corset, or the bust area if it is an overbust corset, and also the bottom edge, which is the hips, obviously. It can take a little bit of practice and time to learn how to measure your corsets precisely. So if you want to take each measurement 3 times and take the average, that's fine. Say an off-the-rack corset, I prefer that all of the measurements match up within ½ an inch. If it's more than ½ an inch, I know that it's going to twist on me. For custom corsets, I would say that ½ an inch is actually pushing it. I would rather have it be within ¼ an inch for precision there. So if you take the measurements of your corset and you find that it is symmetric on both sides, then the asymmetry may be in your body instead. Everybody is a little bit asymmetric, so some asymmetry in your body is not necessarily a sign that you're unhealthy or anything, although some big asymmetries can actually point to some underlying conditions. But some people are more asymmetric than others. I also have a tutorial on how to measure both sides of your body if you are asymmetric. So if you want to see a tutorial and measure yourself to see if you have any glaring asymmetries, I will link the tutorial up there as well. So like I said before, everybody is a little bit asymmetric, and the asymmetry may be in your soft tissue. For instance, most people are stronger and have more muscle tone on their dominant side. So since I am left-handed, I find that the left side of my waist is harder to cinch down because that muscle tone is actually pushing back on the corset. You may also find that if you are more flexible on one side of your body compared to the other, if you say can do a side bend more on one side than the other, then that more flexible side may also cinch in more readily. Because remember, the more that you are cinching in the waistline, the more you are stretching that oblique area. So it makes sense that the more flexible side of your body might cinch a little bit more readily, and the less flexible side, you might feel that stretch a little bit more. Your internal organs are also extremely asymmetric. Barring situs inversus, your heart is on the left side of your body and your left lung has 2 lobes, whereas your right lung has 3 lobes. Your liver is on the right side of your body and the stomach is on the left side of your body. And your liver is quite large. It's a solid organ, even though it's pliable, whereas your stomach is a hollow organ. It's membranous, and if you are corseting down, say before your first meal of the day, it can flatten very easily and move out of the way. So it stands to reason that if you are tight lacing enough to affect the position of your internal organs, that one side of your body may compress more easily than the other side. Now, your skeleton is supposed to be more or less symmetric, but many people do find asymmetry in their skeletons. For instance, I know that my left hip, the left side of my pelvis, actually protrudes out a little bit more than the right side. So I have to be careful when wearing corsets because the left hip tends to find that it's irritated more in a symmetric corset, especially an off-the-rack corset. Some people might have one leg that's shorter than the other, and this causes the pelvis to tilt a little bit, which might make the corset look or feel asymmetric on you. Some people might have an asymmetric rib cage, especially if they were injured when they were younger and had some broken or cracked ribs. And obviously there is the question of scoliosis as well, or a curvature in the spine. So many schools, I believe most schools in North America, do test for scoliosis around the age of 10 to 12 years old. And it's a really easy test. All you need to do is have somebody observe you from the front as you are bending down slowly forward as if you were going to touch your toes. And if you see one side of your body sort of hump up a little bit more than the other side as you're trying to do that, that may be a sign of asymmetry in your rib cage or your spine. People with scoliosis may also have uneven hips and uneven shoulders. It's nothing to necessarily panic about if you do find that you are asymmetric. I know that many people go through their entire lives never knowing that they have any asymmetry until they put on a corset for the first time and they notice that it twists on them a little bit, or they might feel more pressure on one side of the body compared to the other. It doesn't feel right on them. It was the same with me. I never knew that I had any asymmetry in my hips or my pelvis until I put on a corset and I had that irritation on my left side. And this prompted me to actually go see my doctor and a chiropractor. And what actually happened was that my pelvis has been twisted since I was a really little kid, because I was kind of accident prone when I was younger. And I also had a lift in my shoe. My legs were not the same length as I was growing up. It sort of evened out a little bit later on, but the damage had already been done because I've been walking around for 20 years with an uneven pelvis. So now I see a chiropractor on a regular basis to make sure that my hips are straight, and this actually does help my corset sit more straight on me, and it makes corset wearing more comfortable for me. And just as an aside, I feel that I've learned so much more about my body since I started wearing corsets, not just with my skeleton, but what foods agree with me or don't agree with me. I'm more aware of my posture. I feel that I am more in touch with how my body works in general. So let's say you just found out that you have an asymmetry in your body. What can you do about it? Many people with asymmetry can still get away with wearing an off-the-rack, standard-sized symmetric corset. For instance, if you know that you have asymmetry in your hips, you can buy a corset that has expandable hip ties. I know that Timeless Trends, Versatile Corsets, Mystic City, and now Orchard Corset, they all carry off-the-rack corsets with expandable hip ties. So say with me and my kind of more sticky outy left hip, I can expand those hip ties half an inch to an inch more on my left side compared to my right side. You won't really see that asymmetry if it's, say, like 3.5 inches versus 4 inches on the other side. And it would be more comfortable for me to wear. People who have other types of asymmetry or more extreme asymmetry may feel more comfortable investing in a custom asymmetric corset. Asymmetric corsets tend to be more expensive than symmetric corsets because the corsetiere has to take individual measurements of each side of your body and draft a completely different corset pattern for each side. They can't cut in layers of the fabric. They have to cut each side individually, and they also need to take that time to adjust the seams on each side or position the embellishments so that the end effect looks as symmetric as possible on your body, even though you know it's not. I have a gallery of asymmetric corsets, and each picture actually links to the corset maker who made it so that you can contact each one if you're looking for somebody who specializes in asymmetric corsets. So I'll link it right up here somewhere. Most of these corset makers will accommodate your asymmetry, and their goal is to make you as comfortable as possible, to support you, and to make you look as symmetric as possible while not actually changing your skeletal structure in any way. That's not to say that some people haven't tried to use standard size off-the-rack corsets to try and improve their curvature. For instance, one man, Andrej Gogala, had written up actually a study. It's a case study on himself. He had spent most of his childhood wearing back braces, and he still grew up with a pretty significant rotated rib cage and a hump on his back. He used a combination of interrupted corseting combined with special exercises to help with his condition. He said that in his severe case, it did not actually help with the curvature of his spine, but it did help somewhat with derotating his rib cage, which he said actually had other beneficial effects, especially when you have a lot of pressure on your lungs. If you can get more space in your rib cage and you can get it rotated into the right position, it can help you breathe easier. He stressed that the corset itself was not a complete treatment in his extreme case, specifically because the corset has a tendency to put lateral pressure on the body, pressure from each side, and that did not help the fact that he had a hump coming out of the back, so he needed more pressure on the back and less on the sides to help his rib cage expand a little bit more. He actually drew force diagrams for all of this, so I highly recommend that you look at his write-up. I'll link it in the description below. But this is why it's so important that if you have asymmetry and you're looking to improve it with bracing or corseting, that you see some sort of orthopedic technician or a corset maker that is specifically trained in this area, because you don't want to just try any old corset. Looking at Gogala's force diagrams, you can see how the right type of compression can help with asymmetry, especially with asymmetry in the rib cage, because there is no surgical intervention for changing the shape of your rib cage. They said that the best that they might be able to do is go in there, break up the ribs in tiny pieces, and try to reset it in the general shape that you want. Whereas with corseting or bracing over a long time, you might be able to shift it in a certain direction without having to resorting to breaking the bone. But it's extremely important to find the right type of corset for your body, and the best way that you can do this is finding a specialized corsetiere to make a custom corset for you. You need the right tool for the job, because the right tool will give you benefits. The wrong tool, at best would do nothing for you, and at worst it could make your asymmetry worse if it's applying the wrong forces on the wrong part of your body. But for anybody who does have a symmetric skeleton and you're worried that corsets could cause scoliosis or other types of asymmetry, once again look at the force diagrams in Gogala's study below, because he actually shows that if you are symmetric to begin with and the corset is exerting symmetric pressure on your body, it's highly, highly unlikely that the corset could be the cause of any scoliosis. A few hundred years ago, it was thought that corsets could have been the cause of scoliosis, especially as it was seen more in girls than in boys. But even today, 90% of scoliosis patients are females with adolescent idiopathic scoliosis, which means that they started developing symptoms around the time of between 10 and 14 years old, at which, pretty much 0% of the population today at that age and during this time would have been wearing corsets. They shouldn't be wearing corsets. But let's say that you swear you started with a symmetric body, and let's say that you were wearing, say, a poor quality corset that twisted on you or something, and you think the corset did cause some asymmetry in your body. What would you want to do? First of all, I would stop wearing that corset that you think is causing the issue, and I would not put it on again until you figure out what the issue is, whether you had any pre-existing asymmetry in your body, or whether the corset itself was severely warped or it was asymmetric to begin with. So I would not put that corset on until you are absolutely sure of the cause of it, and you also have some experience with modifying your corset. Also, it's your prerogative if you want to start or increase your exercise regimen and try and get the two sides of your body to look symmetric again. You could go to a personal trainer if you want to. If you have one side of your body that's weaker than the other side, you want to build up both sides of your body, and don't do like twice as many reps on one side of your body compared to the other just because you are strong enough to do so, because that's going to result in more muscle tone on one side of your body compared to the other. The long-term effects of corsetry on your silhouette are said to be semi-permanent, which means that if you waist train for a pretty long time, you're pretty dedicated with it, you can see changes in your natural waist when you're even not wearing the corset. But if you stop corseting cold turkey and you go weeks or months without wearing your corset, your soft tissues may revert back to the way they were before. And even if you had trained your rib cage before, over the course of months or years, you can see your rib cage expand again faster, even if you become pregnant or if you take up a sport like swimming that requires you to increase your lung capacity and also increase the size of your rib cage. But yes, this has been Corsets and Asymmetry. So if you have any thoughts on Corsets and Asymmetry, leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you have any asymmetries that required you to actually seek out a custom corsetiere to make an asymmetric corset for you and how you enjoyed that experience. And I will see you all in the next video. Happy holidays. Bye.